going to pivot to another part of the Grange article, which again we're taking with a pinch of salt because it's Grange.
Poor Grange.
Hey, but it is what it is. He has a reputation. He can't do much about it. He just has to live with it at this point. Sources have described a team where the veterans, Van Vliet and Siakam especially, were deeply frustrated with the younger players on the roster, and Van Vliet let them know about it, something the younger set didn't appreciate at all. Nurse wasn't able to bridge the divide as players kept getting hurt, and open three after open three drew only iron. Losing makes everything worse. And then no need to read it word for word, but basically moving on to Masai having to talk to Scotty Barnes and having to talk to the team as a whole. So the thing is, right, we've heard a lot of rumors about this for the last while now. We've heard the stuff about Masai having to talk to people from other sources and just like a variety of sources. We've heard about the older contingent of the team not seeing eye to eye with the younger contingent of the team. The thing I guess that stands out to me about this is I don't think I've ever heard Pascal Siakam name come up in this context. I've heard about Masai, I've heard about Nick Nurse, I've heard about Van Vliet. I've seen Thad Young visibly frustrated with Scotty Barnes at halftime, right? I haven't heard anything about Pascal, right? And here's the thing: you want to tell me about Masai talking to Scotty Barnes like this? Cool. I kind of understand it because I heard the stories about him talking to Kyle Lowry, right? Um, if you want to sell me on the idea that Nick Nurse is a bit of a weirdo and like a not a people's person, cool. You can sell me on that. I don't know, like it makes sense. Like shoe kind of fits there, right? You want to sell me on the idea that Fred Van Vliet's maybe a bit of a old school guy, um, not really, not here for the funnies, self-made, bet on yourself, undrafted, grit kind of a guy, and he doesn't really see eye to eye with a guy like Scotty Barnes. Sure, can sell
Makes
me on it.
sense.
Pascal Siakam, though, that really like Pascal seems like a very mellow, a very I don't know, like more just like of a personable figure. So I'm looking at it of like I'm starting to think, okay, if everybody feels this way, and that's including Pascal Siakam, what if they're right? Like, what if this whole situation ages in the next 5 years and we get a more complete side or a more complete as like a viewpoint on this situation, and we realize like maybe they were right, maybe the young contingent on the team is kind of messing up and not in a not either appropriately going about their careers or whatever. So that's just like the Pascal Siakam part of this is what I want to talk about, because this stuff is it tends to be stuff that I don't like talking about in the context of sports, because
Hmm.
this is all stuff nobody was there for. None of us were here. None of us were in the locker room. We don't know who said what. We don't know who, like, how people feel. We don't know anything, right? Um, and I don't really want to delve into assassinating people's character and like drawing conclusions on people, and all that stuff doesn't really sound fun for me. I like sports because of the
I'll
games
do it for you.
themselves.
No, I'm just kidding. I won't.
And ladies and
uh,
gentlemen, that's what we have Kenyon for. But
no, 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 no.
but no, I just
Okay.
the Siakam part of this is just so I'm
Mhm.
just shocked. And again, it could be completely wrong. But if that's the case, like, how do we actually feel about the situation if Pascal Siakam is also on board with all of this?
So I talked to someone who is I'm not going to say the person's name, but they are a sideline reporter, so they are closer to the team. And when I was speaking to this person, it kind of came up. Just actually, it was me and another person. The other person actually asked the question. Um,
You can just say your sources, because I think that's how people like that's how it works in the industry. You could just say, "Hey,
yeah,
my
yeah,
sources
exactly.
tell me."
Yeah. So my sources. I'm not like that though. But anyways, this person essentially outlined how the dynamic was, right? And in a sense, it was like there's a basketball philosophy divide in terms of in that locker room in terms of how things should go. And the way that they described it was there's a faction here and there's a faction here. But they said that the in between was kind of Pascal because that's how he moves. That was their way of describing it. Now, I would say that this person, I'll tell you after, but I would say that this person was and is fairly, respectable and very credible. Wasn't Grange, that's how they described it, and that was probably around actually the trade deadline. Funny enough, a couple days before, and so this isn't like hyper early in the season or anything either. I think the way to okay, what do you mind me asking where your background is from? Sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, there we go. Are you talking about like the country I'm from?
Yeah, or just in general. Yeah, like
Yeah, I'm from
country or
India.
region. Okay, so um, maybe not. Have
Go
you ever
ahead,
heard of
cook,
what a
cook.
PK is?
A PK, like a penalty kick? Are we talking footy?
Pastor's
Like,
kid.
okay, pastor's kid. I'm not familiar. I
Okay,
could make some assumptions, but I'd rather not. I'll let you cook.
no. So I have family that actually, I'm not from the Cameroons, but my aunt ended up, you know, marrying
Yeah,
someone and moving to the Cameroons and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And also, I just, I have, uh, I do have friends that look like me,
makes sense.
and some of which who are, as the diaspora goes, are from all over the world.
Right.
Um, being from that region in the world and being particularly a pastor's kids and the pastor's kids in general, they tend to move and operate in a very different way. So Pascal's upbringing, I'm not saying he grew up like ruck poor kind of a thing where
Yeah.
he's on the streets, because on the streets there is different than on the streets here.
Yep.
But at the same time, he didn't grow up wealthy either.
Right.
But pastors' kids tend to mind their own business. They tend to just be cool with everyone. They just tend to kind of maybe not softer spoken, but like they're just kind of mellow.
Okay. Yeah.
And so yeah, it's I think that kind of describes Pascal in a lot of ways. The way that he tends to flex his quote unquote power as a um, star on this team. It tends to be more soft power moves, hiring
Yeah.
his brother, Rico, Earl Watson, that sort of thing. Those are more like quiet, under the radar, versus Fred, who's very, hey, I'm going to sit down with JJ Redick and then Shams and then this person, right? Is a very different way of operating.
Yeah.
So he tends to not make a fuss. I think if we saw how it played out on the court again, Pascal probably didn't speak up maybe as much as he could have or should have, but it's not like there were games that he shouldn't have gotten the ball at the end of the quarter either, and he didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, the Orlando game, there's a pick and roll. There was
Yep.
Scotty on one side open, Pascal on the other side for a short
Yep.
roll. Did Van Vliet hit him? No, he went up against Bol. So I
Losing about a
mean,
foot and a half.
yeah. So yeah, last time I checked, Van Vliet for all of his incredible basketball ability is not
Yeah.
Inspector Gadget.
Oh hell no.
So
Yes.
yeah. So I think you know there were times you saw Thad try to talk to Barnes, and things got a little bit testy in the huddle or whatever. If I'm being honest, I think Scotty Barnes is an incredible basketball player and has the ability to do incredible things. But there were times this season where I think that there were a lot of expectations, and I will actually say that maybe early on in the year, Van Vliet probably gave him a little bit more chances and probably wasn't as patient as he should have been.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Um, Specifically, like in the context of on the court or off the court.
On the court in terms of that. Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I think it's like, all right, dude, like pick up the pace and, you know, do what you're doing in the fourth quarter all game. And yeah, I just think
You let
that
a precedent get set a little bit, right? Like you let somebody kind of get into a way of doing things where it's hard to change that 50 games into the season, whereas it would have been different had you addressed it when it was there in the first place.
well, also in a career year, like, and your mantra is bet on yourself, it's kind of hard to be like, all right, man. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that Fred was right, but you can't fully blame him because it's his money, because this is people's livelihoods that are at stake. And so and winning does actually lead to more livelihood being made. So I think, it's really tough. I do think that this year will change a lot. I think I think both Barnes and Siakam need to be empowered more. But going back to the original thing, I think that there are times where being on this roster in general probably wasn't the most fun to be on um, during this past year, because, like I said, you had two people saying that they're point guards, and then occasionally when the media would ask the older point guard about the younger, quote unquote, taller point guard, he would kind of make jabs towards the other not being a point guard.
Yeah, I mean, and that seems like that situation in particular is something I feel like you can pretty easily track, and I think that's the significant of this report, so to say, is that
Yeah.
like this isn't something I think you could have tracked if you watched the season. And I think the way you characterized pastors' kids, a concept that I'm now learning of, like
Look it
the
up.
things
Look
that
it
you
up.
I'll definitely look it up. The things that you said were the ways that I would have characterized Pascal Siakam in terms of being mellow, keeping to himself, kind of like getting along with everybody because you don't necessarily pose a challenge to a whole lot. You kind of just like fit in. So like that's how he came across to me. So that's why this stood out to me, because I was like, well, okay, this didn't come up. He probably would have kept his feelings to himself, but the fact that they exist to me says something. What I
Well, and it
wanted to
even
ask,
says it here, right? Like
yeah,
you read it word for word, and it says,
yeah,
and Van Vliet let them know about it. It doesn't say Pascal. It says, and Van Vliet let them know about it. And
yeah,
Van
not
Vliet,
not Pascal, yeah.
you remember how he described himself? He said, "I'm a
Enlighten
drill
us.
sergeant."
Oh, I missed that somehow. That's see that wow. See that makes sense. Like the whole Fred Van Vliet versus the younger part of the roster, that whole situation tracks so clearly and
Yeah.
easily. Um, Something I wanted to ask real quick. You
Mhm.
mentioned there being a philosophy divide amongst the team where Pascal was the middle in terms of like a basketball philosophy divide.
Well, I when
Did
I
this
say Pascal was in the middle, I don't think he's like siding with one side or the other, but I mean that philosophy divide created
yeah, a
a
division.
fractured. But
Yeah,
yeah, Pascal is just kind of cool with everyone. Like Pascal's cool with
yeah.
look who are the two people that passed to Christian Coloco. It's Pascal and Scotty
And
Barnes.
Scotty Barnes, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. No, yeah. But what I was gonna ask is, like,
Mhm.
did your source shed light on what the divide was philosophically?
No, we didn't really get into it. I my guess is it's how to initiate offense.
Yeah.
That's my guess, which makes sense. I mean, I think Barnes. I don't subscribe to um, positions, but I think that you do need set roles. So you need, like, there's an offensive initiator. There's and so if I'm subscribing to offensive initiation versus a point guard. That I have a theory myself that the way Barnes sometimes plays, he has amazing reads. I think in terms of his understanding of the game, it's top 5 in the league right now, and that's high praise. At the same time, his execution of those reads sometimes needs a lot of work in the half court. I think the way that he wants to play versus the way that would optimize his play doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Fred VanVleet.
Hmm.
Like, a good example, he picks up his dribble a lot sometimes.
Scotty. Yeah.
If you want to be a point guard and an offensive initiator, you shouldn't be picking up your dribble, because the second you pick up your dribble, you stop being a threat as a moving target.
Yep. And that's a cue for all the defenders off the ball to stick to their guy. Because let's take the passing lanes away now. Let's let the on-ball defender try to get the ball out of that person's hands, right? Like it essentially sets off a reaction defensively that isn't what you want if you're the team offensively,
Exactly. Now, can he? Is that a coachable? Like that's super easy to coach out, but it's
especially at
just
such a
like
young age. Yeah,
exactly. But it's like so some of this is like you look at these players and it's like, okay, do they want to play like this or do they not want to play like this? I don't know, right? I don't know. I'm just saying, like, I think Scotty will take a huge leap this year. I think
yeah.
I don't call him a point guard. I say like people have asked me multiple times, like, what do you think Scotty is? I'm like, he can be whatever he wants to be, right? But like, you need to optimize your skill set, and I think that Darko will help with that.
So I agree, and I think that Scotty Barnes probably fits better into a style of play that is a little bit quicker and a little bit more about movement, where like the dynamics of like a transition possession is like what suits him the best, right? And like you can't replicate that in the half court, but when you get guys moving around, when you get things happening at a fast pace, that's the closest you're gonna get. Whereas like the whole like way our offense functioned last year, where it's like really slow, stagnant, um, one guy has the ball and everybody else is kind of just watching to see what happens. That doesn't really suit what he wants to do at all. So that should be an interesting thing to watch to see how the team as a whole fits into that style of play. Because while that suits Scotty Barnes, I kind of suspect that it may not suit some of the other players in the team. So we'll have to see how that whole thing ages. Um, if you do have any thoughts, real quick, babe, on that in particular, because the last thing I have is the comments Scotty Barnes made about Darko, which is like we can get into that and just wrap up.
Oh no, we can just go. Yeah, no, let's go straight to the
Okay,
Scotty
cool.
Barnes stuff.
We'll go straight into that.
Hopefully, I'm not sounding like I'm negative about Scotty Barnes because clearly I'm not.
Oh,
I
not
hope
not
that
at all.
that's
Because like if somebody leaves with the impression of that, like one thing you mentioned, he can be whatever he wants. You mentioned that he has top 5 IQ. You mentioned a lot of like really, you mentioned a lot of really good things. If people leave with that impression, that's a them problem. Ultimately.